I'm very pleased and honored to welcome to Transition Protocol a very distinguished commentator on world affairs, particularly as it relates to the financial aspect of world affairs, because everything is run by finance. And this war is that everybody has been talking about. We have been talking about it a lot on this channel is, in our view, a war about the supremacy of the petrodollar. So uh, I want to welcome Alex Krainer. This is Transition Protocol. If you like what we do, kindly hit the subscribe button for $5, which is less than half a cup of a coffee. Every month, we will deliver inside your mailbox a briefing, which is the security briefing that discusses everything that we speak of right here from commentators recognized for their expertise all over the world. So, welcome, Alex, and I apologize on the air for having delayed you, but the floor is yours. Please say what you believe is the real reason for the war that has the entire world focused on it at this time.
Zulfiqar, thank you for having me. No need to apologize at all. These are the very, very minor things in life. The war, which seems to be deteriorating rapidly. What are we now? We are 23 July 2026. Is a truly mystifying event, but it's not. It should have been predicted. It was predictable. The only thing that wasn't predictable that it would be exactly Trump who would cross the Rubicon and go past the point of no return by attacking Iran in February of this year. I recently read a major report by a British think tank called the Policy Exchange, and the lead author was Sir John Jenkins, one of the British foreign policy heavyweights who used to, who is close to British intelligence, close to British Foreign Office, used to work as ambassador in places like Libya, Syria, Saudi Arabia, practically the whole, a, a deeply embedded expert on the Middle Eastern region. And so the report was published in July of 2023, and I think it's very significant that it predates, 7 October. And this policy spells out the events that we are observing today almost to a T. It's related to British, what they call a comprehensive review, which is their major foreign policy approach. It announces, well, it actually the their it announces British tilt to the Indo-Pacific. They called it tilt to the Indo-Pacific. But then they say we can't do the tilt in Indo-Pacific until we pacify and bring Iran under control. And there's clearly a sense of urgency about that in this paper. And then it spells out the elements of policy that need to be put in place before Iran can be tackled. And it spells out not only taking down Syria, of course, but it also talks about enhancing the special partnership between Britain and Israel, which is something that is not talked about. Most people are talking about events in the Middle East and it's all Trump, Trump, Trump. But all of this predates Trump by at least 2 decades. And then if you read these documents, and there are also various documents published by the Chatham House as well, you see that the British are very, very annoyed with the Americans for their inaction. And they were even very worried about, there was a Rafael Grossi of IAEA traveled to Iran in March of 2023 and issued a statement together with the Iranians, a joint statement. And basically, the British were very annoyed because they said, well, the wording of this statement clearly indicates that they want to go back to the JCPOA negotiations, and that the Americans want to go back to the JCPOA negotiations because the American policy has been for 20 years wait and see, and that the situation in the Middle East has deteriorated because of American inaction, meaning, the Americans haven't been bombing enough. And so all this has to be, jolted back into, how do you call it, into action. They practically announced that there will be conflict between Israel and Iran, that Israel will attack Iran, that they will attack their nuclear facilities, and that this will lead to a regional escalation, to a regional war. And they clearly say that this is something of an urgent matter, that the United Kingdom, which has small and ineffectual military, that it has to take advantage that Russia is all tied up in Ukraine, that Finland and Sweden are coming into NATO, and this will complicate things for Russia, so that the Russians won't be able to intervene in Iran on the side of Iranians, right? And that there was a very narrow window of opportunity for the UK to catalyze a radical change in the Middle East. And this radical change clearly is aimed at Iran, that Iran is absolutely the centerpiece of the Middle East. And it even goes as far as spelling out that Venezuela has to be taken out. Why? Because Iran, the IRGC, and Hezbollah were spreading their influence to Latin America, and that their hub for that activity was Venezuela, and basically that Hugo Chavez and Maduro opened the gates to cooperation with Iran, and so therefore Venezuela has to be taken out, or we need to take control of Venezuela. That happened as well. So it's I'm finding myself deeply mystified that Donald Trump, who I wouldn't say is on friendly terms with the UK, and who has declined British lobbying campaign in 2019 to attack Iran for them, has ended up pursuing exactly the policy spelled out by these British think tanks, which are very, very, which are practically, the think tanks centered around the City of London and British Foreign Office. Now, what does that have to do with petrodollar? The very fact that petrodollar is US dollar in effect makes the whole thing seem that it's an American affair, right? Dollar is an American currency. Petrodollar was created by Henry Kissinger together with the Saudis and so forth. So nobody is looking for a British role in all this. But up to 60% of all US dollars in circulation today circulate outside of the United States, not in the United States. So they're not under control of the Federal Reserve Bank, even less by the US Treasury. They are under the control of the City of London and their 14 offshore centers. That's where most of this money. And I think that this is the key to the British power. And I think also, come to think of it, it's if we talk about British power, it's important to distinguish this from the Great Britain, as in, ordinary British people, like, the people living in the United Kingdom and struggling to make a living there. This is British deep state. And I'm leaning, the more I learn about all this, the more I'm leaning to something that I would label Anglo-Zionist conspiracy, because it's it does seem to stem from the city of London as the headquarters of the conspiracy, but it absolutely has a Zionist element to it. So, they themselves, they have a something of a strategic partnership with Israel since 2021. That is, it goes back longer than that, but it was actually formalized in a document in 2021. And then this 2023 policy paper, which is called, I think, Iran Questions and the British Foreign Policy, something like that. It's available. It's a monster 72-page document available on a Policy Exchange website. And so we see that somehow this Anglo-Zionist conspiracy was managed to co-opt the Trump administration, as they have done with previous administration, but with Trump administration to a much greater extent. And how this happened and why this happened is mystifying to me. But defending and preserving the petrodollar is probably one of the most important elements to this, because petrodollar is the mechanism how the wealth of the region of Western Asia converts into US dollar cash flows that mostly flow towards the city of London and their offshore centers. And I think that this is the key to British and Anglo-Zionist power, because they control most of these money flows. They control the petrodollar to a greater extent than the United States does. So this is what the fight is all about. It's spelled out. It has to do with trade. It has to do with that trade being conducted in US dollars. And now we have, again, the dumb giant carrying water for this Anglo-Zionist conspiracy in the Middle East.
I could not have done a better job. In fact, I don't know of too many people who could have done a better job, Alex, and that is why I was so much looking forward to welcoming you here. And even though you were so gracious to say no, don't mention it, but I do want to apologize one more time because I was so much looking forward to this conversation. I have no clue what happened. In any case, remember Mossadegh, right? Everybody who has any clue about what is going on has a knowledge about Mossadegh. So even in Mossadegh's time, it was the British who went and convinced the Dulles brothers, the head of CIA, the head of the Foreign Office, the State Department, to go convince Eisenhower to conduct the coup in Iran, so that the Shah, who was a playboy living in Italy at the time, could be brought back as a young man who had no clue about anything, but was the perfect person to be controlled by the British and the Zionists and the Dulles brothers to enact the Zionist policy, the British policy, the American policy, and then ensued another 50 years of horrible policies enacted by the Shah. Now, unfortunately, man plans, and if you believe in God or if you don't believe in God, it doesn't matter. But the forces that shape the world, they plan something else. And today we are at a situation where anybody who is an observer of world events with an astute eye can see without any question that the United States is not going to leave that region victorious. There is nobody who thinks that in a serious way. I don't know whether or not anybody CENTCOM thinks that in a serious way. Earlier, I had Parveen Sawani, a very distinguished commentator on military affairs, saying that he has thought deeply about this, and he cannot see any avenue that allows the U.S. to leave, other than with its tail tucked behind, underneath its, behind. I talked to many distinguished observers of what is going on, including our regular founding members, Pepe Escobar and Larry Johnson, as well as military experts, including those from Pakistan. Absolutely convinced that this is not going to end well for the United States. In fact, it's going to end well, end very, very badly. So when this is all over, I mean, it's just a question of time. It's not a question of if; it's just a question of when. You are a very astute commentator on the financial angle, which is the petrodollar. I played a role for which I'm not proud. It was Bill Simon, the Treasury Secretary, who actually made all this happen under the advice of Kissinger and working with the King Faisal and all of those others who made all of this architecture, come about, where more and more and more dollars would be charged rather than less by the Saudis and the OPEC, and they will all come back to the Treasury to finance, the endless wars and finance, whatever the U.S. wishes to do. So now this is going to come to a collapse. I mean, I'm boldly predicting that, and not too boldly because everybody knows that. What is your view, Alex? When this comes crashing, sooner or later, just a question of when. What do you think is going to happen to the U.S. dominance, the hegemony, the petrodollar dominance, the way in which the world is structured presently? When things are going to change dramatically.
Yes, exactly. I think that things are going to change for radically better, but the transition period will be painful and risky and dangerous for everyone. And I think that for a period of time, which I think it's impossible to predict how long it will take, things are going to get very, very rough for many people. And I think when I say that things are going to get much, much better, the petrodollar has been the key element, the key mechanism of enforcement of imperial, colonial, well, neo-colonialist subjugation of many parts of the world. I agree with you that the days of U.S. hegemony in the Middle East and many other areas of the world are now coming to an end, and it's not going to be an overnight process. But I think that the United States is now, and generally the Western Empire is now on an irreversible decline. It's already the whole edifice has already been hollow for decades, but it wasn't clear, it wasn't obvious. The United States was maintaining their hegemony in many places by relying on allies to fight their wars and on projection of power. And that meant that if somebody wanted to craft an independent policy and say, okay, we don't want IMF loans, we don't want to be in a relationship with the World Bank, then the United States would impose sanctions first, then they would activate their massive network of NGOs. And it's not just American NGOs, almost invariably you'll find British NGOs that are there, probably even more prevalent in all key regions of the world. They would start to destabilize the local government, and if nothing else works, they would send their aircraft carrier groups and start dropping bombs. So the fact that Iran stood up and they said, "Fine, bomb us. We're gonna fight back," and then Iran was left standing, and now they have suddenly emerged as an almost impossible to dislodge regional power. This has been a very stark lesson to all the rest of the world to say, hey, the empire is not invincible. There's considerable chinks in its armor. So we're going to see independence movements gain more ground and become more bold. And they're going to be seeking fairer access to global markets, to trade their exports and to acquire their imports on terms that they seem fair and acceptable. And for the first time in the last 500 or 600 years, there's actually an alternative, because up until now, the West was able to colonize much of the world because if you wanted to participate in global market, there was no alternative but to Western centric financial flows. So if you were any nation, African, Asian, whoever, if you wanted to sell your exports on global markets, you had to be plugged in into the Western financial systems. You had to have recourse to Western banks. You had to have bank branches in London or Paris or wherever. Today, this is no longer true. Now, an alternative has emerged, and it's gaining ground, and it's the BRICS movement, the Belt and Road Initiative, the Chinese yuan, or the emerging petro yuan, and Iran now is in perfect position to say, okay, fine, oil can flow through the Strait of Hormuz and through Bab el Mandeb, but it cannot be traded in US dollars. And so they already initially made those decisions. I don't know to what extent that they are being enforced today, but this is far more powerful for Iranians than even having a nuclear bomb. And at this point, it's practically irreversible. I don't know what the United States can do to to take this power from Iranians' hands. And I think that Russia and China, as two other major power on Eurasian landmass, have every incentive in the world to to work together with Iran. Because if Iranian government were to fall, then in time, the Western Empire would pick off the Russian government, and then they would pick off the Chinese government, and they would reestablish Western. Well, that's what they want to do anyway. They would reestablish the Western unipolar global order, and they would absolutely demolish any alternatives to it. And we see that today when Scott Besson goes on CNBC, he's talking about getting everybody back into the dollar system.
I have
And
to I have to laugh. Sorry about that.
yeah,
I apologize.
no, no. Well, it is kind of funny because it's very unrealistic. I mean, he's talking like, oh yeah, when this war with Iran is over, the flow of oil and Iranian exports and commerce, it's all going to go back to the dollar system. And then when the war in Ukraine is over, the Russians are going to want to come back into the dollar system. I'm thinking, like, why would the Russians want to go back to the dollar system? Didn't you all just froze their nearly 300 billion of their assets, and you're not letting them use it? Aren't you threatening to do the same to practically all the uh, Gulf kingdoms who have, between their sovereign, between their current account balances and their sovereign asset funds, they have something close to $5 trillion in US dollar denominated assets, and you're conditioning what they may use that money for. You can buy this, but you cannot buy that. You can buy weapons from Lockheed Martin and General Electric, but you cannot buy Russian weapons or Chinese weapons. And so if everybody in the world had one wish, one desire regarding the US dollar system, it's to diversify out of it, to have choice. Because, dollar is still very useful. US dollar is not going to go away overnight. People understand what US dollar is. Today, if you say a barrel of oil costs $90, everybody understands what that means. If you say it costs so many yuan, it's there's a psychological inertia, and that's going to hold for a good long while. But to have a choice to say, okay, we're gonna trade in US dollars, but we want to trade in other currencies as well, and we want to have our balances in Chinese banks and in Russian banks and in Indian banks and so forth. That's the reality that's not going away. So Scott Bessent is basically venting his wishful thinking, but it's really wishful thinking, and their means of enforcing it now are basically far, far too weak to make a difference anymore. I think that the West has experienced a strategic defeat, and what we're seeing now is just the residue conflicts and wars that are basically a cleanup phase.
Absolutely, and I apologize that I was smirking when you mentioned about Scott Bessent. Even somebody like Bessent, who I think is a ghastly figure, knows better than that. The world is not coming back to, especially the Russians, are not going to start pricing their oil in dollars anymore. In fact, I will boldly predict that this is the pricing of the oil in the dollars as far as oil that goes out of the Strait of Hormuz is on is going to on a steep decline. I mean, on a very steep decline. Not something that is going to go on a gradual slope, but a steep slope. And the Iranians have not given such heavy sacrifices unless they knew this is what they wanted to happen. As somebody who was responsible for erecting this, many years ago, part of the team, I know that it is coming apart, and I'm very happy that it's coming apart. So when this does come about, it's not going to be that much. I mean, I know not everybody says it's going to happen overnight. I'm not saying it's going to happen overnight, but over 5 years, the world will be very different, Alex. I mean, in my view, very, very
Yes.
different. So,
Yes.
with that, there will be no question about this. There will be a dominant power in the world, and it will not be the United States, as far as I can see. But you have a
Uh,
learned eye.
yes, I think we're going into the multipolar global order. And when you mentioned 5 years, I smiled because 5 years is exactly the time period that the British gave themselves to take control of Russia without the United States. So they spelled it out. We have 5 years to take control of Russia without the United States in order to preserve the global order as is today, which is this Anglo-Zionist conspiracy with the petrodollar and so forth. And they are clearly not counting with the United States. It's a massive complication for them, but I think it's so profoundly unrealistic that it's definitely going to turn out into some kind of a desperate attempt and it'll wither. I think that in the United States itself, the support for Israel has collapsed. Uh, the support for returning to American Republican roots is gaining momentum. I think that the American people are starting to realize what has been done to them over the last 2 or 3 decades. They've lost prosperity, they've lost technological edge, they've lost their industries, their their infrastructure is in disrepair and in very urgent need for a refresh. And this is in fact why Donald Trump has won the presidential elections twice, because he was promising to tackle exactly these challenges. Well, okay, Trump may have turned out a disappointment, but the public mood in the United States didn't change. If anything, it went farther into that direction. And so, I always go back to what Sergei Karaganov said in the early months of Donald Trump's administration. He said, we see our role today, meaning Russia's role, to help the United States transition from being a global hegemon to being a normal major power in the least disruptive way possible. And so today, as we speak, today is the 23rd July. Uh, Marco Rubio is meeting with Sergei Lavrov in Manila, I think. And it'll be very, very interesting what we get from out of that meeting because um, mysteriously and strangely, the Marco Rubio has made some cryptic noises in the last few days, mentioning the assassination of Italian Prime Minister Aldo Moro, and also my jaw dropped to the floor. He also mentioned the assassination of Alfred Herrhausen, the German banker who was killed in 1989. And Alfred Herrhausen, this is a very, very important episode of human history. Alfred Herrhausen was the CEO of Deutsche Bank, and he was the key economic advisor to uh, Prime Minister Chancellor Helmut Kohl. Alfred Herrhausen was very influential, and he was pushing for a partnership between Germany and Russia. You know, the kryptonite of the British Empire, the thing that the British Empire was scared most of all, a partnership between Russia and Germany. And Alfred Herrhausen thought, like, okay, so Russia has is the communist bloc fell apart. Russia is going to come back into the fold of the Western nations. German technology with Russian resources and industries is the winning combination, and he was starting to push German foreign policy in this direction. And then he was killed. Now, both Aldo Moro, the Italian prime minister, and Alfred Herrhausen were their assassination was chalked up to radical left wing organizations like the Red Brigades in Italy, and then I forget the one in Germany. And their murders were never really uh, the let's say the they were never gotten to the bottom of conclusively. But we know almost certainly that it was NATO structures controlled by the NATO in Europe that were behind these actions. Now, the fact that Marco Rubio is mentioning these things at all is to me very surprising. But second thing is it's again on track of, in January this year, the American delegation was in Davos, and in Davos they were talking about the failure of globalization, meaning the failure of the unipolar Western-centric global order, the need to transition. The American Secretary of Trade, Jamieson Greer, gave a speech in which he specifically mentions people like Henry Carey, Alexander Hamilton, Abraham Lincoln. He's talking about the American system of political economy. And this is so important. This is called either the national system of political economy or the American system, which is practically uh, an economic foundation for multipolarity. And this was so explicit in Davos that I thought at the time this is practically a declaration of war to the globalists. And what Alfred Herrhausen was doing was very much on track on bringing Germany onto this national system of political economy. When I talk about this, I have to go back and give the context to this. If you listen to people like George Soros, like Klaus Schwab, and many other leaders in this Western globalist Davos club, they often talk about the clash between two systems of governance, right? They say that everything we're experiencing, everything that we're observing in the world today, is part of this clash between two systems of governance. And what they're talking about is, democracies versus autocracies, right? The good guys versus the bad guys. But this is like a self-serving lie. But this conflict has its economic foundations, and the economic foundations are the conflict between the British system of free trade, which basically entails unrestricted flow of capital everywhere around the world, and nations and regions competing for investment capital by it's basically a race to the bottom, right? You produce cash crops, you produce cheap stuff, commodities for export. You remove labor protections. You remove tariffs. You basically take away any kind of an expense item that reduces the return of on capital. And by that, we're talking about the City of London, Wall Street, and their satellite banks around the world to maximize return on capital, right? So that's the British system of free trade. The other system is what I'm talking about, the national system of political economy, or the American system. And when you take this American system, you then start coming across names like Alexander Hamilton, Henry Carey, Abraham Lincoln, and then Friedrich List, the German economic miracle of the late 19th century. And then in our times, you get to Jacques Cheminade, who influenced Thomas Sankara, whose example is followed by Ibrahim Traore. You talk about Alfred Herrhausen and the potential partnership between Germany and Russia, and you're talking about the economic miracles that we're experiencing today from places like Russia and China, because they're now explicitly applying that model of economic governance. And this is what the globalist empire, the British deep state, and this Anglo-Zionist conspiracy want to destroy. And so now the fact that Marco Rubio, I'm sorry, this is a bit convoluted, but it's absolutely a reality that's passing under the radar of what's coming in the front headline news. The fact that Marco Rubio is mentioning Alfred Herrhausen and that he's meeting with Sergei Lavrov today is a great surprise for me. But I think that it indicates that this transition from unipolarity, from the globalization, to multipolarity is very much alive and well, and that it's slowly gaining momentum. And so I'm very, very hopeful about that. And again, I think this is great news for everyone else, because it suggests a transition to economic sovereignty and independence, rise from poverty, much greatly enhanced prosperity, and return to, let's say, civilizational foundations of many societies around the world, which still have those civilizational foundations intact. Persian civilization, Chinese civilization, European, Mediterranean civilizations, Russian, and so forth. Return to the roots, as opposed to a unipolar, homogenized world where diversity amounts to LGBT and DEI, things like this.
Yes. Well, Alex, I'm fascinated by the depth of analysis that you provide. I truly am fascinated. And some people may think that I am engaging flattery. I honestly am just recognizing brilliance, because I have myself observed all of this. I have myself studied all of this, and been a part of this, as I discussed earlier. not happy about my original contributions, but happy about what I'm doing right now, which is hopefully helping to dismantle this. And this is the kind of in-depth analysis that is not really available, absolutely not in legacy media, not at all.
No, to
And
the contrary, they don't want you to know any of this. They want you to not know any of this. They want you
well,
to think that global warming and LGBT things are the most important things in the world.
yes, transgender comes right next to that as well. But thankfully, it is coming to an end. People are waking up, Alex. I was a consultant to all three networks during their heyday because of my work in quantitative methods in helping them gain more audiences. I mean, I did all the wrong things as I was growing up, as unfortunately some people do. Not all of them, but some. And I say that from my knowledge of those times. Every single show used to bring in 30 to 40 million people watching them, regardless of what they put up. And they wanted more. And that is why they hired people like me to help them achieve that. This is in the 70s, early 70s. But now they're lucky to get 1 million, and shows like ours are getting there now. In that realm. And this is one of the reasons I did this, and this is one of the reasons why we exist, is to bring the voices like yours, analysis like yours, to a wide range of people all over the world. People are waking up. I mean, as I was saying earlier, man proposes and God, if you believe in God or believe in destiny, whatever, forces of the world, they have another idea. So this is going to happen, Alex. There's no question it's going to happen. I will put my reputation online. I will put my, whatever it is that I have online, that this is going to happen. This is not something that, whether it happens or not, no, it's going to happen. The question is, does it happen in 6 weeks or 6 months, or not? It's not going to be 6 years. It's going to be in months where this is going to happen. Praveen Sawhney was saying, he teaches military strategy and has been very famous for that, that what Iran has done will be studied for years in military academies by taking with what little they had, and literally forcing the United States into a situation where it has no options, eventually no options other than to leave. And the bases are all going to be gone. In fact, they're mostly gone already anyway. The U.S. is concentrating now in Israel, which was actually going to bring my next question. What do you think is going to happen to Israel after all this is said and done?
Well, the late leader of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, predicted that Israel would not live to see its 80th birthday. And we're getting there, that's less than 2 years from now. And, Hassan Nasrallah was a very, very respected thinker. And if people don't think that his prediction was valid, in 2012, Henry Kissinger predicted that Israel would be gone within the next 10 years. Henry Kissinger's prediction turned out to be too soon. So that would have been 2022, right? That Israel was going to disappear. But even if he missed the time frame, Henry Kissinger understood why he made that prediction, as did Hassan Nasrallah. Israel has no future. Israel entirely depends on its defense, for its defense, and for its economic viability on its Western partners, primarily the United States. And Israel built itself as like a high tech society that's producing premium goods and so on and so forth. But Israel high tech, virtually all of it, is designed for dystopian uses. Actually, it's systems for control, surveillance. They think it's so brilliant if they sell you a pager that explodes on you. And I think that's so clever, but that doesn't have any use in normal economy. Nobody will want to buy products if I'm talking about civilian use. Nobody will want to buy any product if they suspect that it was designed or built by Israeli tech companies, and nobody wants their surveillance systems. And so I think that they, what else have they got? Okay, so they stole some natural gas finds from the Gazans, but Israel is surrounded by about 110 million hostile Arab people and another 92 million of hostile Persian people. The United States has now evacuated their 17 largest bases around Iran. And as you said, they are now concentrated in Israel. Action against Iran from Israel is extremely complicated because it involves 3,000-kilometer round trips for jet fighters. All they have is nuclear weapons. That's the only element that could actually put a dent in Iran's defenses. And if they use a nuclear weapon ever, they're finished. That's the end. That's basically the suicide mission. So there's definitely no future. I think that we're going to have to learn to deal with Iran being the 800-pound gorilla in the Western Asia. This is what the Russians and the Chinese are counting on. Actually, the Chinese basically designated Iran to be the anchor of political stability in Western Asia. That's going to enable trade to flourish through the Belt and Road Initiative, but also across Russian international north-south transport corridor, which goes from the Indian Ocean up to St. Petersburg, which is much faster and much cheaper than the Indian Ocean Suez route. That is essential for the Europeans. And so we see political and economic power shifting to Russia and China. And we see now Iran emerging practically as a I'm not going to say superpower, but
A
it's
regional
getting
heavyweight. A regional
very,
heavyweight.
very considerable heavyweight. And I think it's only a matter of time before this strategic power becomes economic power as well. Because now that Iran is going to free itself from 120 years of Western colonial harassment, maximum pressure sanctions, all kinds of obstacle to trade, Iran is going to blossom. It's going to experience a renaissance. It's going to be another point of gravity where everybody in the region is going to be developing their economies in cooperation with Iran and trading with Iran. I think it's very difficult to try to predict the time frames for all this to start happening, but it's already happened. We're already past the inflection point where all of these developments begin to accelerate. And I would say, looking at the examples through history, it usually takes a generation more or less. Like if we look at Russia, the Soviet system collapsed in 1991, and today Russia is a superpower again with the large, prosperous, diversified economy. That started with Vladimir Putin, who came into power at the end of 1999. So we're talking about 20, 25 years. So I think the next 25 years are going to be completely transformative for Western Asia. And I think it's going to be much, much better for the people there and for everybody else involved as well.
Well, I kept you longer than I thought, but you were providing such great analysis that I was compelled to just keep on asking you more questions. But I'll ask you one more if you don't.
Of course.
Uh, well, what is your view of what happens with the Pakistan relationship that Iran has quoted? In fact, Momini, permanent, a representative of Ayatollah Mojtaba Khamenei, was there in Islamabad. In fact, he extended his stay. From everything I heard, very very happy with his stay, and I mean the window dressing is that it's talking about trade, which is obviously very important, and they want to expand the trade multiple times. But he's really talking about a strategic relationship, uh, and there's no doubt it's going to come about. It's just a question of how quickly again, not when, but I mean, not if, but when. So if these two people get together, which they are getting together, what do you think? How this shapes up for the region?
Well, I think that given that the strategic defeat of the West is a fait accompli, I think that Pakistanis are going to be pushed in the direction of improving relations with Iran, China, Russia, which are already very, very good. But the problem is that for Pakistan, like for Saudi Arabia, uh, the situation is very delicate and very complicated. As I said, these Gulf kingdoms have up to $5 trillion of their assets tied up in the West, and this is and Pakistan is in a similar relationship. They're still vulnerable to destabilization from the Western powers. And so, for every government, the number one priority is staying in power. Not being overthrown. And if they get overthrown, things could get very bad very very quickly. Meaning, you could have some new Zelensky or Pashinyan, like Pashinyan in Armenia. They suddenly start derailing all progress in completely the wrong direction. So staying in power is important, and staying in power means that your economy has to be relatively stable, and the people in your country have to be satisfied with your governance. And so, if Western powers suddenly cut off Pakistani funds, imposed sanctions, or did something like that, that would be a heavy blow to Pakistani economy or Saudi economy, where suddenly, paying out military, government, teacher salaries, nurses' salaries became an issue, that could rapidly destabilize the government. So I think that over the next few years, the Gulf kingdoms, Pakistan, uh, they both see what you and I discussed here. I think they're all intelligent players. They're all rational. They all see the writing on the wall, but they're still very, very much vulnerable to Western pressure, Western sabotage, and so forth. And so they have to tread very, very carefully. And so I think that they will continue to tread very, very carefully. But I think that the long term, they understand that, well, Henry Kissinger again said it. It's very dangerous to be an enemy of the United States, but being the friend of the United States is deadly. They
Yes, he
they
did say
now
that.
understand this better than anything Henry Kissinger could have said, but they're still caught in a situation that they're vulnerable. And I think that overcoming these vulnerabilities will take a while. It's not going to be an overnight thing. And between now and then, they're going to have to tread very, very carefully, and they will. But beyond, so Pakistan will come out and then they will blast the Yemenis, and that they're going to, call up Iranian ambassador and to say that they're very displeased with this and that. But I think that these are forms that still have to be satisfied. Uh, I think it would be suicidal for Pakistan to suddenly go on a hostile route towards the emerging new realities.
Well, and from everything that I see, everything that I hear, my interactions, they are treading this needle very carefully,
Yes.
very carefully. Alex, I am so thrilled to have you here, and I'm so honored to have you here. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to getting you back here as we discussed. Hopefully, 2 weeks from today, same time. Same time. Is that okay? I mean, next time I will make sure that my. I mean, I have no clue why this did not work because
Well,
it's supposed to
Zulfiqar,
work.
just to be fair, the last time I stood you up by more than half an hour
That's
because
okay.
I was traveling and got very confused about times.
Yes, that's
And
okay.
so, you were 5 minutes late today. This is not even a thing.
Well, thank you, Alex. I look forward to seeing you 2 weeks from today for all of our audience all over the world in 12 different languages, every time zone. This is Transition Protocol, and I was honored, privileged to have Alex Krainer the second time on our show, and he will be a regular guest on our show every 2 weeks and providing us his wisdom from a very unique perspective, which is the global finance. If you like what we do, please subscribe. Please become a paid subscriber through our Substack channel for $5, which is the half of a cup of a coffee. We will deliver everything that we do in your mailbox, and we shall see you again soon. Thank you very much, Alex. I really appreciate your taking the time to talk to us and being so generous with your time. Thank you, sir.